Between the 1940s and 1980s, America's highways were fueled by 30 sandwiches that most people today have never heard of. They were served in roadside diners, truck stops, and tiny cafes where drivers gathered at all hours of the night. Then, almost without anyone noticing, they began to disappear. Some vanished when family-owned diners closed. Others were pushed aside by chain restaurants and modern menus. One was so popular that drivers crossed state lines just to order it. These sandwiches did not just feed truckers. They became legends of the American road. This is the number one every driver ordered at 2 in the morning. After 17 hours behind the wheel, truck drivers wanted one thing: something hot, fast, and real. Not fancy, not complicated, just food that understood what the road took out of you. The truck stop sat off Route 30 in Ohio, one of those places where the lights stayed on all night and the cook never left the griddle. Drivers pulled in when their eyes started closing on the highway, when coffee wasn't enough anymore, and they needed something solid. The cook grabbed a handful of ground beef, slapped it on the griddle, pressed it flat. The griddle was black from decades of use, seasoned so deep the metal looked like cast iron. The patty sizzled. Fat pooled at the edges. He left it alone for 90 seconds, then flipped it once. American cheese went on top, melting into the crust. The bun toasted beside it, soaking up grease. He wrapped it in wax paper. Mustard, 3 pickle chips, raw onion sliced thin. 75 cents at the register. Drivers ate it standing at the counter. Hot, salty, simple. Just beef cooked right on a griddle that knew what it was doing. That's why they ordered it every time. The grilled cheese wasn't complicated. White bread, American cheese, butter. That was it. But the way they made it at truck stop diners, that was different. The cook buttered both sides of the bread, not just one. Laid it flat on the griddle, 2 slices of cheese in the middle. Let it sit until the bottom turned golden brown and crispy, then flipped it with a metal spatula that had been flipping sandwiches since 1952. The cheese melted slow. By the time the second side finished, the cheese had fused with the bread, hot, stretchy, impossible to eat without burning your mouth. The crust crackled when you bit into it. The inside was molten. Diners served it with a bowl of tomato soup on the side. Some drivers dunked it, some didn't. Either way, it cost 50 cents and came out in under 3 minutes. Kids loved it. Drivers who'd been on the road too long and couldn't stomach anything heavy loved it. Night shift workers coming off 12 hours at the factory loved it. It was the kind of food that didn't need explaining. Just bread, butter, cheese, and a griddle that had cooked 10,000 of them exactly the same way. Simple worked. 2 slices of white bread, mashed potatoes in the middle, roast beef on top. Brown gravy poured over everything until it soaked through the bread and pooled at the edges of the plate. That was the hot roast beef sandwich, open-faced. Fork and knife required. Diners made it from Sunday's leftover roast. Whatever beef hadn't sold got sliced thin and kept warm in a metal pan with beef drippings. By Monday morning it was ready. The bread went down first, soft enough to absorb gravy without falling apart. Mashed potatoes got scooped into the center, still steaming. Beef slices layered on top, gray-brown and tender. Then the cook ladled gravy over the whole thing. Thick, salty, rich. It arrived at the table still bubbling. Drivers ate it slow because it was too hot to rush. The bread turned to mush halfway through. The potatoes disappeared into the gravy. The beef fell apart with a fork. Nobody ordered it in summer. Too heavy. But in January, when the highway was frozen and the heater in the truck barely worked, drivers ordered it twice. Once for the plate. Once for the warmth that lasted an hour after they walked back outside.
Many of you have been asking where to find these recipes. We've gathered hundreds of them from the Depression era through the 1970s in our cookbook, Grandma's Kitchen. Complete instructions, pro tips in 10 chapters. Link is in the description below. Now, let's get back to the video.
The French dip showed up at diners in the 1950s, and truck drivers figured out immediately it was the perfect sandwich for people who didn't want to stop moving. Roast beef sliced thin, so thin you could see through it, piled high on a torpedo roll that had been toasted just enough to hold its shape. No lettuce, no tomato, no mayonnaise, just beef and bread. The sandwich came with a small metal bowl of au jus, beef drippings mixed with broth, still hot enough to steam. Drivers dipped the sandwich before every bite. The bread soaked up the juice without falling apart. The beef stayed tender. The whole thing disappeared in 5 minutes, and you could eat it with one hand while reading a map with the other. Some diners made the au jus from scratch. Some used powdered mix. Drivers didn't care as long as it was hot and salty. The sandwich cost 85 cents at most places, a little more than a hamburger, but worth it if you wanted something that felt like a real meal without the weight. It wasn't fancy, but it worked, and on the road, that's all that mattered. Every diner made tuna salad the same way: canned tuna, mayonnaise, celery chopped fine, a little bit of salt. That was it. They mixed it fresh every morning and kept it cold in a metal bowl behind the counter. When someone ordered a tuna sandwich, the cooks scooped it onto white bread, 2 thick slices, and cut it diagonal. Some places added a leaf of iceberg lettuce. Some didn't. Either way, it cost 60 cents and came with potato chips on the side. Drivers ordered it when the weather was hot, and they didn't want anything heavy. It was cold, easy to eat, and didn't sit in your stomach like beef or fried food. Women ordered it more than men. Back then, tuna salad was considered lighter, more appropriate for lunch. The sandwich showed up at every Woolworth lunch counter in America. Same recipe, same white bread, same diagonal cut. You could order it in Maine or California, and it would taste identical. Mayonnaise heavy, slightly fishy, cold enough to feel refreshing. It wasn't special, but it was reliable. And at a truck stop diner in the middle of nowhere, reliability was exactly what people wanted. Raw hook 5 down, 25 to go. The next 5 include a sandwich that only exists in one state, a Depression-era meal made from leftovers nobody would touch today. Something fried that requires both hands. And a regional legend truckers drove 300 miles out of their way to eat. Keep going. Egg salad was cheaper than tuna. That's why diners kept it on the menu. Hard-boiled eggs, usually a dozen at a time, peeled and chopped with a fork until they were crumbly. Mayonnaise mixed in until it held together. A little bit of mustard for color. Salt and pepper. That was the whole recipe. Diners made it every morning and kept it in the refrigerator next to the tuna salad. When someone ordered it, the cook spread it thick on white bread and cut it diagonal. Some places added lettuce. Most didn't bother. It cost 35 cents at Woolworth lunch counters in the 1960s. The cheapest sandwich on the menu besides peanut butter. Drivers didn't order it often. It was too bland for someone who'd been on the road since sunrise. But elderly women loved it. Office workers on lunch breaks loved it. Kids whose mothers packed their school lunches made it at home the same way diners did. Eggs, mayo, white bread. The sandwich didn't taste like much, just creamy, slightly sulfuric, cold. But it was filling, and in 1965, 35 cents could still buy you lunch if you didn't need anything fancy. Nobody orders it anymore. This is number 7 from the intro, only exists in Mississippi. Southern diners didn't use buns for catfish. They used cornbread. The catfish came from local rivers, channel cat mostly, caught fresh and filleted the same day. The cook dredged it in cornmeal, salt, and black pepper, then dropped it into a cast-iron skillet filled with lard heated to the point where it shimmered. The fish fried fast, 3 minutes, maybe 4. till the crust turned golden and crunchy. Meanwhile, the cornbread came out of the oven, not the sweet kind. The kind made with buttermilk, no sugar, baked in a cast-iron skillet until the edges were crispy. The cook split a square of cornbread in half, laid the catfish fillet across the bottom, and closed it. That was the sandwich. No lettuce, no tartar sauce, just fried catfish and hot cornbread. Truckers driving through Mississippi knew which diners served it. They'd pull off Highway 61, walk in, and order it without looking at the menu. The sandwich came with coleslaw on the side and cost $1, which was expensive for 1970. But catfish was harder to get than beef, and cornbread took time. Nobody outside the Deep South ever figured out how good it was. 3 slices of white bread, toasted, mayonnaise on all 3. That was the foundation, bottom layer. Sliced turkey breast, real turkey, not deli meat. Left over from Sunday dinner, lettuce on top of that. Then the middle slice of toast. Then crispy bacon. Then tomato sliced thin. Then the top piece of toast. The cook cut it into 4 triangles and held it together with toothpicks. The club sandwich showed up at upscale truck stops, the kind with tablecloths and waitresses instead of just a counter. It cost more than most sandwiches, $1.25 in the 1970s. But it was big enough to split, and drivers who were tired of hamburgers ordered it when they wanted something that felt like a real meal. The sandwich was tall, hard to eat without the toothpicks. The bacon crunched, the turkey was tender, the tomato was cold, the toast was warm. Everything worked together if you bit through all 3 layers at once. It was the kind of sandwich that made you feel like you were eating at a restaurant, not a truck stop. And sometimes that's exactly what drivers wanted. The meatloaf sandwich wasn't on the menu, but every diner served it anyway. Meatloaf was Monday's special, made from Sunday's leftover ground beef mixed with breadcrumbs, eggs, ketchup, and onions baked in a loaf pan until the top turned brown. By Tuesday, whatever meatloaf didn't sell got sliced cold and turned into sandwiches. White bread, thick slice of cold meatloaf in the middle. Some diners added mustard, some added ketchup, some added both. The sandwich got cut diagonal and wrapped in wax paper, 50 cents. Drivers ordered it when they were in a hurry. It was fast, cold, and portable. You could eat it while walking back to the truck. The meatloaf was dense, heavy enough that one sandwich filled you up. The ketchup baked into the meat gave it a sweet, tangy flavor that didn't need much else. Nobody thought it was fancy. It was leftovers turned into lunch. But diners didn't waste food, and meatloaf kept for 3 days in the refrigerator, so cold meatloaf sandwiches were reliable midweek options when the roast beef ran out. Simple, cheap, filling. That's all it needed to be. The loose meat sandwich came from Iowa. Some people called it a Maid-Rite. Some called it a tavern. Either way, it was the same thing. Seasoned ground beef on a bun, no sauce, no cheese, just meat. The cook browned ground beef in a skillet with onions, salt, pepper, and a little bit of water to keep it from drying out. The meat stayed loose, crumbly, not formed into a patty. When someone ordered it, the cook scooped a pile of beef onto a soft white bun, mustard and pickles on the side. That was it. The sandwich was messy. The beef fell out of the bun with every bite. Drivers ate it over the plate, scooping up what fell with a fork. It tasted like a hamburger without the char, milder, saltier, almost steamed instead of grilled. Loose meat sandwiches stayed regional. You could find them in Iowa, Nebraska, parts of Illinois. Everywhere else, people looked at like you were serving them unfinished food. But in the Midwest, it was a staple, cheap, fast, and filling. Diners charged 60 cents for it. Some places still do. Corned beef hash wasn't supposed to be a sandwich. It was a breakfast side, fried potatoes, chunks of corned beef, onions, all mixed together in a cast-iron skillet until the bottom got crispy. Diners served it with eggs. But somewhere along the way, Truck stop cooks figured out you could put it on toast and call it lunch. The hash came out of a can most places. Libby's or Hormel didn't matter. The cook dumped it into a hot skillet, pressed it flat with a spatula, and let it sit until the bottom formed a crust. Then he flipped it in sections, breaking it apart so every piece got crispy edges. The whole thing took maybe 5 minutes. 2 slices of white bread went into the toaster. When they popped up, the cook piled the hash on top, still steaming, greasy, salty. Some places fried an egg and put it on top. Some didn't. Either way, it was heavy, cheap, and filling. Drivers ordered it in the morning when they needed something that would last until dinner. The sandwich cost 70 cents with the egg, 50 without. It tasted like diner breakfast compressed into something you could hold. The hash soaked into the toast. The beef was salty and fatty. The potatoes were soft in the middle, crispy on the outside. You ate it with a fork half the time because it fell apart. Nobody called it fancy, but it worked when nothing else did. The barbecue sandwich came from the South, but by the 1960s, truck stops across the country were serving their own versions. Most of them weren't authentic, but drivers didn't care as long as the beef was tender and the sauce was thick. Brisket cooked low and slow. 6 hours, sometimes 8, until the meat pulled apart with a fork. The cook sliced it thin, piled it on a soft white bun, and ladled barbecue sauce over the top. The sauce was sweet, tangy, sometimes smoky, depending on where you were. Texas diners made it spicy. Carolina diners made it vinegar-based. Midwest diners used bottled sauce from a jar. The sandwich came with coleslaw on the side. Some places put the slaw on top of the beef. Some left it separate. Either way, the slaw cut through the sweetness of the sauce and made the whole thing easier to eat. Brisket sandwiches were messy. The sauce dripped down your hands. The bun soaked through halfway down. You needed napkins, lots of them, and even then, you'd finish with sticky fingers. Drivers loved it anyway. It tasted like something cooked with care, even when it wasn't. The beef was soft enough to chew easy after hours on the road. The sauce made everything taste better. And at $1.10, it felt like a bargain compared to sit-down barbecue joints. It wasn't a real barbecue, but at a truck stop diner in Ohio at midnight, it was close enough. Not every diner served chicken liver, but the ones that did had drivers who swore by it. Chicken livers came cheap. A pound cost less than ground beef. The cook soaked them in milk for an hour to take out the bitterness, then dredged them in seasoned flour, salt, pepper, paprika, garlic powder. Into hot oil they went, 3 minutes until the outside turned crispy and dark brown. The livers went onto a soft hamburger bun, still hot. Some cooks added mustard. Some added mayonnaise. Some added hot sauce, lettuce and tomato if you were lucky. The sandwich cost 65 cents at most places. It tasted like iron. Rich, dense, almost metallic. The liver was soft inside, crunchy outside. If you'd never eaten liver before, the flavor hit hard. But drivers who grew up in the South knew it. It was poor people's food turned into something good. The sandwich wasn't for everyone. Some drivers tried it once and never ordered it again. Others ordered it every time they stopped. There was no in-between. Chicken liver disappeared from diner menus by the 1980s. Tastes changed. People wanted chicken breast, not organs. The livers were too strong, too unfamiliar for younger customers who'd grown up on McDonald's. But for a while, it was a real option. Cheap, filling, and different from every other sandwich on the menu. That counted for something when you'd been eating hamburgers for 3 days straight. Grilled chicken showed up at truck stops later than the other sandwiches. Sometime in the 1970s, when people started caring about health and diners needed something on the menu that wasn't fried beef. The chicken breast was boneless, skinless, flattened with a mallet until it was even. The cook seasoned it with salt, pepper, maybe a little garlic powder, then threw it on the griddle. No oil, no butter, just meat on hot metal. It took about 6 minutes flipping once. The chicken went on a toasted bun with lettuce, tomato, and mayonnaise. Some places offered cheese. Most didn't. The sandwich cost $1, same as a hamburger, which annoyed some drivers who figured chicken should be cheaper. It wasn't a popular order. Truck drivers didn't go to diners for grilled chicken. They went for burgers, roast beef, fried things. But women ordered it. Office workers on lunch breaks ordered it. People who were trying to eat lighter ordered it. The sandwich was fine. The chicken was tender if it was cooked right, dry if it wasn't. The lettuce and tomato made it feel fresher than most diner food. But it didn't have the flavor of fried chicken or the richness of beef. It was just chicken on bread. Still, it stayed on the menu, because by the 1970s, diners had to offer something healthier, even if nobody really wanted it. That's just how things changed. This is number 15 from the intro. Confused everyone who saw it. The chow mein sandwich came from Fall River, Massachusetts. Nowhere else. A woman who owned a restaurant called Me Some invented it sometime in the 1930s, and it stayed local for decades. It wasn't complicated. Canned chow mein, the kind with celery, bean sprouts, and bits of chicken in a brown gravy, heated on the stove until it was hot, then scooped onto a hamburger bun. That was it. No lettuce, no sauce, just chow mein on bread. People from outside New England saw it and didn't understand. It looked wrong. Chow mein was supposed to come with rice or noodles, not a bun, but in Fall River and a few surrounding towns it was normal. Diners served it. Drivers ordered it. It cost 50 cents and came with a side of crunchy noodles. The sandwich was soft and wet. The bun soaked up the gravy. The bean sprouts stayed crunchy. The chicken, if you could find any, was shredded fine and mixed in with the vegetables. It tasted like Chinese takeout compressed into something portable. Truckers driving Route 24 through Massachusetts stopped just to try it. Some loved it. Some thought it was the strangest thing they'd ever eaten. Either way, they remembered it. The chow mein sandwich never spread beyond southeastern Massachusetts. It stayed regional, strange, and specific. But the diners that served it for 50 years, 15 down, halfway there. The next 5 include something made from fish most people won't eat anymore. A sandwich so messy it requires a fork. A Depression-era favorite nobody admits they loved. And 2 regional legends that truckers still argue about. These weren't just meals. They were proof the road had its own rules. Smoked whitefish showed up at diners near the Great Lakes, Michigan, Wisconsin, parts of Minnesota, anywhere close to water where fishermen could smoke their catch and sell it cheap. The fish came whole, skin still on, smoked over wood until the flesh turned golden and flaky. The cook peeled the skin off, pulled the meat from the bones, and broke it into chunks. Cream cheese went on dark rye bread, thick, cold, tangy. The fish piled on top. Sometimes they added raw onion, sometimes capers. Depended on the place. The sandwich was rich. The fish tasted smoky and oily. The cream cheese balanced it out, made it creamy instead of dry. The rye bread was dense, strong enough to hold everything without falling apart. Drivers who grew up near the lakes knew the sandwich. It was common in fishing towns, less common everywhere else. By the time you got to Ohio or Indiana, diners stopped serving it. Too regional, too unfamiliar. The whitefish sandwich cost 80 cents in the 1960s, which was expensive for a fish sandwich. But the fish was fresh, and smoking it took time. Drivers either loved it or hated it. There wasn't much in between. The flavor was too strong for people who grew up on tuna salad. But near Lake Michigan it was normal. Diners served it. Fishermen ate it. Truckers on the northern routes knew which places made it right. It never made it to the rest of the country, just stayed where the fish were. The Reuben wasn't invented at truck stops, but truck stops made their own version. Cheaper, faster, close enough. The real Reuben used corned beef, Swiss cheese, sauerkraut, Russian dressing, all griddled on rye bread until the cheese melted and the bread turned crispy. Truck stop versions skipped the Russian dressing half the time, used Thousand Island instead, or just mustard. Sometimes the corned beef was fresh, sometimes it came from a can. Didn't matter, drivers ordered it anyway. The cook buttered the rye bread, laid it on the griddle. Corned beef piled on one slice, thin if it was good, thick if it wasn't. Sauerkraut on top, drained so it didn't make the bread soggy. Swiss cheese over that. The second slice of bread closed it. The whole thing pressed down with a spatula. It cooked slow, 3 minutes on each side. The cheese melted into the sauerkraut. The bread turned golden and crispy. The corned beef warmed through. The sandwich came to the table still hot, cut diagonal. It was salty, tangy, rich. Sauerkraut cut through the fattiness of the beef. The rye bread held everything together. You needed napkins. The juice from the sauerkraut dripped out the sides. The Reuben cost $1.25 at most places. More than a hamburger, but worth it if you wanted something that felt like a real deli sandwich. It wasn't authentic, but it was close, and at a truck stop in Nebraska, that was good enough. Fried bologna was a Southern thing. Poor people's food that somehow ended up on diner menus across Appalachia and parts of the Midwest. The bologna came thick-cut, not deli thin, but sliced about a 1/4 inch, like a small steak. The cook threw it on the griddle. No oil, no butter, just meat on hot metal. The bologna curled up at the edges as it cooked, forming a cup shape in the middle. Some cooks cut a slit in the center to keep it flat. Some didn't. It fried for 2 minutes on each side. The edges got crispy and dark. The middle stayed soft. When it came off the griddle, it went straight onto white bread. 2 slices, soft, untoasted. Mustard, yellow mustard, always. Raw onion if you wanted it. That was the sandwich. It cost 40 cents in the 1960s. Cheapest thing on the menu besides grilled cheese. Drivers who grew up poor knew it. It tasted like home, even when home wasn't something you wanted to think about. The bologna was salty, greasy, slightly charred. The mustard added tang. The bread soaked up the grease. You ate it fast because it wasn't the kind of sandwich you savored. It was fuel. Fried bologna never disappeared completely. Some diners still serve it, but it stopped being common by the 1980s. People wanted better, or at least they wanted to pretend they did. But for a while, it fed a lot of drivers who didn't have much else. The patty melt was supposed to be made on rye bread with grilled onions and Swiss cheese. That's how the fancy diners made it. Truck stops made it cheaper. White bread instead of rye, American cheese instead of Swiss. The onions were optional. Most places skipped them. The beef patty was thin, cooked on the griddle like a hamburger. But instead of a bun, it went between 2 slices of buttered white bread with a slice of cheese on top. The cook pressed it down with the spatula while it cooked. The bread turned golden. The cheese melted. The beef stayed flat. It took 3 minutes total. The sandwich came out crispy on the outside, soft in the middle. The beef was salty. The cheese was gooey. The bread tasted like butter and griddle grease. It wasn't fancy, but it worked. Drivers ordered it when they wanted something more than a plain hamburger, but didn't want to spend extra. It cost the same as a burger, 75 cents, but felt like more because it came on bread instead of a bun. The budget patty melt stayed on menus through the 1970s. By the 1980s, it disappeared. Too plain, too cheap-looking. Diners wanted their menus to look nicer, even if the food was the same. But for a long time, it was there. A hamburger pretending to be something better, and drivers who knew what they were getting ordered it anyway. The cold turkey sandwich wasn't fancy, just sliced turkey breast, lettuce, tomato, mayonnaise, white bread, but it showed up at every diner in America, and drivers ordered it when they didn't want anything hot. Turkey came from Sunday's roast. By Monday, whatever turkey didn't get turned into hot turkey sandwiches, got sliced cold and kept in the refrigerator. The slices were thick, real turkey, not deli meat. When someone ordered a cold turkey sandwich, the cook layered the slices on white bread added iceberg lettuce, a slice of tomato, and mayonnaise on both pieces of bread. It didn't have the richness of roast beef or the saltiness of corned beef. It tasted mild, almost plain, but that's why people ordered it. Women liked it. Office workers liked it. Drivers who'd been eating fried food for 3 days liked it. It was light enough that you didn't feel heavy afterward. It cost 75 cents at most places, same as a hamburger. The cold turkey sandwich stayed on menus longer than most of the others. Even when diners started closing in the 1980s, you could still find a cold turkey sandwich at any remaining lunch counter. It wasn't exciting, but it was reliable. And sometimes, after a week of driving through truck stops and eating whatever was hot and fast, reliable was exactly what you wanted. Just turkey and bread, nothing more. The hot turkey sandwich looked exactly like the hot roast beef sandwich, except it used turkey instead of beef. 2 slices of white bread, mashed potatoes in the middle, turkey on top. Brown gravy poured over everything until the plate was swimming in it. Diners made it the same way they made the roast beef version, using Sunday's leftover turkey. By Monday morning, whatever turkey hadn't been eaten got sliced thin and kept warm in a metal pan with turkey drippings. The bread went down first, soft enough to soak up gravy without disintegrating immediately. Mashed potatoes got scooped into the center, still steaming from the pot. Turkey slices layered on top, gray-white and tender. Then the cook ladled gravy over the whole thing. Thick, salty, rich, made from turkey drippings mixed with flour and milk. The sandwich arrived at the table still bubbling. You couldn't pick it up. Fork and knife required. The bread turned to mush halfway through the meal. The potatoes disappeared into the gravy. The turkey fell apart with barely any pressure. Drivers ordered it in winter when the roads were frozen, and the heater in the truck barely worked. It was hot, heavy, comforting. The kind of food that warmed you from the inside and lasted for hours. In summer, nobody touched it. Too heavy, too much gravy. But from November through March, it was one of the most popular sandwiches at Midwest truck stops. The hot turkey sandwich cost 90 cents at most places. A little more than a hamburger, but worth it if you wanted something that felt like Thanksgiving dinner compressed into a single plate. Some diners served it with cranberry sauce on the side. Most didn't bother. The gravy was enough. It stays on menus longer than a lot of the other sandwiches. Even in the 1980s, when independent diners were closing and chains were moving in, you could still find a hot turkey sandwich at any truck stop that served breakfast all day. It was reliable, filling, and cheap to make. As long as there was leftover turkey, there was a hot turkey sandwich. Nobody calls it gourmet. Nobody pretends it's fancy. But for decades, it fed drivers who needed something warm and filling and didn't care what it looked like. That's all it ever needed to be. This is number 22 from the intro. Requires a fork and both hands. The fried catfish sandwich showed up 2 ways at truck stops. The first was the Mississippi version with cornbread. The second was the coastal version, catfish on a regular bun fried whole, too big to fit. The catfish fillet was fresh, pulled from local rivers or bought from fishermen who sold their catch to diners every morning. The cook dredged the fillet in seasoned cornmeal, salt, black pepper, cayenne if the diner was in Louisiana, paprika if it was farther north. The fillet went into a cast-iron skillet filled with hot lard or vegetable oil, whatever the diner used. It fried for about 4 minutes until the coating turned golden brown and crunchy, and the fish was cooked through. The problem was the size. A whole catfish fillet was longer than a hamburger bun. The cook laid it across the bun anyway, letting the ends hang over the sides. Tartar sauce went on the bottom bun. Lettuce and tomato on top if you were lucky. The top bun barely covered half the fish. You couldn't eat it like a normal sandwich. The fish was too long, too delicate. If you picked up with both hands, The fillet broke in half and fell onto the plate. Most drivers gave up halfway through and used a fork to finish the pieces that fell off. The sandwich came with coleslaw on the side and cost $1.25, which was expensive for a fish sandwich in the 1970s. But catfish was harder to get than ground beef, and frying it right took skill. If the oil wasn't hot enough, the coating turned soggy. If it was too hot, the outside burned before the inside cooked through. Drivers loved it anyway. The fish was flaky and mild. The cornmeal crust was crunchy and salty. The tartar sauce added tang. It tasted fresh in a way most truck stop food didn't. The fried catfish sandwich stayed regional. You could find it in the South and along the Gulf Coast, but north of Tennessee, diners stopped serving it. Too expensive, too much work, easier to serve burgers and roast beef. But in Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana, it was a staple. Still is in some places. Chicken salad was the upscale option at truck stop diners. It cost more than egg salad or tuna salad, and it showed up at places that wanted to look a little nicer. Diners with tablecloths, waitresses in uniforms, menus that didn't have grease stains. The chicken came from Sunday's roast chicken, the same way turkey and roast beef got turned into sandwiches. By Monday, whatever chicken hadn't been eaten got pulled from the bones, chopped fine, and mixed with mayonnaise, celery, and a little bit of salt. Some diners added grapes or walnuts. Most didn't. Too fancy, too expensive. The chicken salad got scooped onto a hard roll, the kind with a crispy crust and soft inside. Some places toasted the roll first, some didn't. Lettuce went on top. Tomato if the diner had it. The sandwich got cut in half and served with potato chips on the side. It cost $1 at most places, which made it one of the more expensive sandwiches on the menu. Drivers didn't order it often. It was too light, too mild, not filling enough after hours on the road. But women ordered it. Office workers on lunch breaks ordered it. People who wanted something that felt cleaner than a hamburger ordered it. The chicken salad sandwich tasted like mayonnaise with bits of chicken mixed in. The celery added crunch. The hard roll gave it structure. It was cold, easy to eat, and didn't leave you feeling greasy afterward. But it never became a truck stop staple the way hamburgers and roast beef sandwiches did. It was too expensive to make. Chicken cost more than beef in the 1960s, and pulling the meat from the bones took time. Most diners only made chicken salad once, twice a week, and when it ran out, it ran out. By the 1980s, chicken salad started disappearing from truck stop menus. The diners that survived the interstate highway system were the ones that served fast, cheap food. Chicken salad wasn't fast, it wasn't cheap, and the drivers who kept those diners in business wanted burgers, not salad. But for a while, it was there. A little bit of refinement at the edge of the highway. Proof that even truck stops could serve something that wasn't fried or smothered in gravy. The beef steak sandwich wasn't made from steak. It was made from ground beef, formed into a thin, flat patty the size of a dinner plate, then cooked on the griddle until it was crispy at the edges. The patty was bigger than a hamburger patty. Wider, thinner, seasoned with salt and pepper. The cook pressed it flat on the griddle and left it alone for about 3 minutes. The beef rendered its fat. The edges got dark and crunchy. When he flipped it, the second side cooked the same way. The patty went onto a hamburger bun, but it was so big it hung over the sides. Some diners added grilled onions, some added mustard, some added nothing. The sandwich came with fries and cost 85 cents. Drivers ordered it when they wanted something bigger than a hamburger, but didn't want to spend money on an actual steak dinner. The beefsteak sandwich was cheap, filling, and tasted like a hamburger stretched to its limit. The meat was crispy where it touched the griddle, soft in the middle. The bun barely held it together. You had to eat it fast. The grease soaked through the bun within 5 minutes. By the time you were halfway done, The bottom bun was falling apart. Most drivers just gave up and ate the rest with a fork. Beef steak sandwich was popular in the Midwest, Iowa, Nebraska, parts of Illinois. Farther south, diners didn't serve it. Too plain, too much like a hamburger. Farther east, it got replaced by other versions. Cube steak sandwiches, country fried steak sandwiches, things that were closer to actual steak. But in Iowa, the griddle beef steak sandwich was a staple. Cheap, fast, filling. Exactly what truck stops needed to serve. It started disappearing in the 1970s. Drivers wanted variety. Menus got longer. The beef steak sandwich was just a hamburger with a different shape. And once people realized that, they stopped ordering it. By the 1980s, most diners had taken it off the menu entirely. But for 20 years, it was everywhere. Bigger than a burger, cheaper than a steak, cooked on the same griddle that had been cooking food since 1945. It wasn't fancy, but it worked. And for a long time, that's all truck stop food needed to be. God was old world food, the kind of thing immigrants brought with them and kept eating long after their kids wanted nothing to do with it. But in New England, it stayed on diner menus well into the 1960s, especially at places near the coast where fishing was still part of the economy. Salt cod came dried and preserved, hard as wood. The cook soaked it in water overnight to rehydrate it and pull out some of the salt. By morning, the fish was soft enough to flake apart. He boiled it for 10 minutes, drained it, then broke it into chunks with a fork. The cod mixed with mayonnaise, a little bit of lemon juice, finely chopped raw onion, and black pepper. That was the whole recipe. The salad got scooped onto dark rye bread, 2 thick slices. Some places added lettuce, most didn't. The sandwich got cut diagonal and served with a pickle on the side. It cost 60 cents in the 1960s, cheaper than tuna salad because salt cod was cheap. Fishermen had been preserving cod with salt for centuries. It kept forever. It didn't need refrigeration. And in coastal towns, you could buy it at any general store. The sandwich tasted like the ocean. Salty, fishy, briny. The cod was flaky and dense. The mayonnaise made it creamy. The raw onion added bite. If you weren't used to it, the flavor was overwhelming. But if you grew up eating salt cod, it was normal. Drivers who weren't from New England tried it once and never ordered it again. Too strong, too fishy, too much like something their grandparents ate during the Depression. But drivers from Portuguese, Italian, or Irish families knew it. They ordered it without looking at the menu. Salt cod salad disappeared from diner menus by the 1970s. Younger customers didn't want it. It reminded them of poverty, of hard times, of food people ate when there was nothing else. Fresh fish was easier to get. Tuna salad was milder, more acceptable. But for a while, you could still find it at diners in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, parts of Maine, places where the old-timers still came in for coffee every morning and ordered the same sandwich they'd been eating for 40 years. It wasn't for everyone, but the people who loved it really loved it, and when it disappeared, nobody replaced it with anything. 25 down, 5 left. The final stretch includes a Depression-era sandwich made from organ meat nobody admits they miss, a Midwest legend that never left Iowa, something fried in a way most kitchens can't do anymore, and 2 forgotten classics that tasted better than they sounded. Almost there. It wasn't popular, but it was cheap, and truck stop diners served cheap food. Beef liver came in thin slices, about a 1/4 inch thick. The cook soaked it in milk for an hour to take out some of the bitterness, then dredged it in seasoned flour, salt, pepper, garlic powder. Into a hot skillet it went, fried in butter or bacon grease for about 3 minutes on each side. The liver cooked fast. If you left it too long, it turned tough and rubbery. While the liver fried, the cook caramelized onions in the same pan. Sliced thin, cooked slow in the leftover grease until they turned soft and sweet. The onions went on top of the liver, and the whole thing went onto white bread. Some diners added mustard, some didn't. The sandwich cost 50 cents in the 1960s. Cheapest thing on the menu besides bologna. Drivers who grew up poor knew liver. It was depression food. Organ meat nobody wanted, but everyone ate because it was affordable. The liver tasted like iron. Rich, dense, slightly metallic. The onions helped. They were sweet and soft and cut through the heaviness of the meat. The bread soaked up the grease and turned dark at the edges. Some drivers loved it. Some wouldn't touch it. There was no in-between. The flavor was too strong, too specific. Either you grew up eating it and it tasted like home, or you tried it once and swore you'd never eat it again. Liver sandwiches disappeared from diner menus by the late 1970s. Americans stopped eating organ meat. It reminded them of hard times, of war rationing, of meals people ate when they couldn't afford anything better. Beef got cheaper, chicken got cheaper. There was no reason to eat liver anymore. But for 30 years it was on the menu. At diners in Appalachia, the rural Midwest, parts of the South, where people still remembered what it was like to go without. Truck served it because it was cheap and filling, and some drivers still ordered it. Nobody misses it now. Liver and onions became a punchline, the thing kids were forced to eat in old sitcoms. But back then, it was real food, made from what was available, cooked fast, served cheap. It fed people when there wasn't much else, and for a long time, that was enough. The loose meat sandwich had a dozen names depending on where you were. Made Right in Iowa, Tavern in other parts of the Midwest, Made Right in Nebraska. Didn't matter what you called it. It was the same thing everywhere. Seasoned ground beef on a bun, no sauce, no cheese, just meat. The beef cooked in a skillet with onions, salt, pepper, and a little bit of water to keep it from drying out. The cook stirred it constantly, breaking it apart so the meat stayed loose and crumbly instead of forming into chunks. It took about 10 minutes. The beef browned, the onions softened, the water evaporated. When someone ordered a loose meat sandwich, the cook scooped a pile of the beef onto a soft white bun, mustard and pickles on the side. That was it. No ketchup, no lettuce, no tomato, just meat and bread. The sandwich was messy. The beef fell out of the bun with every bite. Drivers ate it over the plate, scooping up what fell with a fork. Some places served it with a spoon. It tasted like a hamburger without the char, milder, saltier, almost steamed instead of grilled. The loose meat sandwich stayed regional. You could find it all over Iowa and Nebraska, parts of Illinois and Missouri. Everywhere else, people looked at it like you were serving them unfinished food. Why wasn't it formed into a patty? Why wasn't there any sauce? It didn't make sense unless you grew up with it. But in the Midwest, it was everywhere. Diners charged 60 cents for it. Some places still do. It was fast, cheap, and filling. You could make a big batch of seasoned beef in the morning and serve loose meat sandwiches all day without ever turning on the grill. The sandwich never became a national thing. It stayed Midwestern, small-town specific. McDonald's and Burger King didn't serve anything like it. Chains didn't know what to do with it. But independent diners kept it on the menu for decades. Even now you can still find loose meat sandwiches at old truck stops in Iowa. Same recipe, same bun, same messy, crumbly beef that falls apart before you finish. It's not fancy, never was, but it worked. And in Iowa, that's all a sandwich ever needed to do. Fried cod sandwich. Fried cod showed up at diners near the ocean. New England, parts of the Great Lakes, anywhere close to water where fresh fish was easy to get. Inland diners didn't serve it. Too expensive to ship, too hard to keep fresh. The cod fillet was thick and white, mild tasting, firm enough to hold together when fried. The cook dreaded it in seasoned flour or cornmeal, salt, pepper, sometimes a little Old Bay seasoning if the diner was near the Chesapeake. Into hot oil it went, fried for about 4 minutes until the coating turned golden and crunchy. The fillet went onto a soft white bun, sometimes toasted, sometimes not. Tartar sauce on the bottom. Lettuce on top if the diner was trying to be nice. A slice of tomato if you were lucky. The sandwich came with coleslaw on the side and cost $1, which was expensive for the 1960s. The coating was crunchy and salty. The tartar sauce added tang. It was lighter than most diner food, no grease pooling on the plate, no heaviness that lasted for hours. Fried cod sandwiches started disappearing in the 1970s when frozen fish sticks became cheaper and faster. Diners stopped buying fresh cod. They bought pre-breaded frozen fillets instead, and the sandwiches weren't the same. The coating was too thick. The fish was too small. It tasted like freezer burn. By the 1980s, most truck stops had stopped serving fried fish entirely. Too much work, too expensive. Easier to serve burgers and chicken, but for a while, fried cod was a real option. Fresh fish, fried to order, served on a bun with tartar sauce. It wasn't fancy, but it was good. The kind of food that reminded you diners used to cook things from scratch instead of heating them up from a bag. Nobody makes it like that anymore. But the drivers who ate it in the 1960s still remember what it tasted like. The cold corned beef sandwich wasn't the same as a Reuben. No Swiss cheese. Just sliced corned beef, rye bread, mustard. That was it. The corned beef came from the deli case, sliced thin on a mechanical slicer. Good diners sliced it to order. Cheaper diners sliced it in the morning and kept it wrapped in wax paper in the refrigerator. Either way, the beef was pink, salty, tender. The slices were so thin you could almost see through them, and when the cook stacked them high, they compressed into layers that pulled apart with every bite. The sandwich was simple. Dark rye bread, 2 slices. Brown deli mustard spread thick on both sides. Corned beef piled high in the middle, enough that the sandwich was hard to bite through. Some places added a slice of Swiss cheese. Most didn't. The sandwich got cut diagonal and served with a pickle on the side. A half-sore pickle if the diner knew what it was doing. A regular dill pickle if it didn't. It cost 90 cents at most places, more expensive than a cold turkey or ham sandwich because corned beef cost more. But drivers who wanted something with flavor, something salty and strong, ordered it anyway. The sandwich had weight. It felt substantial in your hands. The kind of thing that would keep you full for hours without making you tired. The sandwich tasted like a New York deli, even when you were eating it at a truck stop in Kansas. The corned beef was rich and salty, cured with spices that left a slight peppery bite on your tongue. The rye bread was dense and slightly sour, sturdy enough to hold all that meat without falling apart. The mustard was sharp, cutting through the fattiness of the beef. Everything worked together. Cold corned beef sandwiches stayed on diner menus longer than a lot of the other sandwiches. Even in the 1980s, when truck stops were closing and chains were moving in, you could still find a corned beef sandwich at any place with a deli counter. It was easy to make. The meat kept for a week in the refrigerator. You didn't need a griddle or a fryer, just a knife and bread. The sandwich never disappeared completely. You can still find it now at old-school delis and diners that survived. Same rye bread, same brown mustard, same thick-cut corned beef stacked high enough to make your jaw tired. It's not exciting. It doesn't have a story about how it was invented or why it's regional. It's just a cold meat sandwich that tastes good. But that's why it lasted, because sometimes drivers didn't want a story. They didn't want something fried or smothered in gravy. They just wanted corned beef on rye. Simple, salty, good, and for 50 years, truck stop diners gave them exactly that. Soused herring was Scandinavian food, the kind of thing Finnish and Swedish immigrants ate and nobody else understood. But in parts of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, places where Scandinavian communities settled, it showed up at diners and truck stops, served on dark rye bread with raw onion. The herring came pickled in vinegar, salt, sugar, and spices. It was sold in jars, already prepared, cold and tangy. The fish was silver gray, slippery, cut into thick fillets. The cook laid the herring on dark rye bread, slice, open-faced, raw onions sliced thin on top, sometimes capers, sometimes a boiled egg sliced and arranged next to it. That was the whole sandwich, or not really a sandwich at all, since there was no top piece of bread. Just fish on bread eaten with a fork. It cost 50 cents in the 1960s. Cheap because herring was cheap. The fish was abundant, easy to catch, easy to preserve. Scandinavian families had been eating pickled herring for generations. It was breakfast food, lunch food, holiday food, something you served at weddings and funerals and every Sunday morning after church. The sandwich tasted like vinegar and fish, sharp, salty, oily. The herring was soft and slippery, almost melting on your tongue. The onion was crunchy and pungent, raw enough to make your eyes water. The rye bread was dense and slightly sweet, heavy enough to soak up the vinegar without turning to mush. If you weren't used to it, the flavor was overwhelming, too strong, too fishy, too much like something you'd find in a jar in your grandmother's basement. But if you grew up eating it, it was normal. Drivers from Finnish and Swedish families ordered it without hesitation. They knew what it was, they knew what it tasted like, and they knew most other people wouldn't touch it. That was fine. More for them. Soused herring disappeared from diner menus by the 1970s. The younger generation didn't want it. It was too old world, too immigrant, too much like poverty food. Fresh fish was easier to get. Tuna sandwiches were milder and more American. Nobody wanted to smell like pickled fish after lunch. By the 1980s, you couldn't find it anymore. The diners that served it had closed. The Scandinavian communities had assimilated. The kids who grew up eating pickled herring moved to cities and stopped making it. They wanted pizza and hamburgers like everyone else, but for a while, it was real. Served at truck stops in northern Minnesota, ordered by drivers who remembered the old country or whose parents did. It fed people who wanted something that tasted like home, even when home was a fishing village in Sweden they'd never actually seen. Nobody makes it anymore. But it was there, part of the road, part of the menu, part of what made American diners strange and specific and local. 30 sandwiches, 4 decades. All of them made behind diner counters by cooks who never wrote anything down because they didn't need to. Griddled beef, fried catfish, turkey and gravy, liver and onions, pickled herring on rye. Most of them disappeared quietly when the independent truck stops closed and the interstate highway system rerouted traffic away from the small towns where those diners had stood since the 1940s. The chains moved in with standardized menus, national brands, food that tasted the same in Maine and California, because it came from the same distributor, heated in the same equipment, served by people who'd never learned to make anything from scratch. The griddles that had been seasoned black for 30 years got thrown out. The cooks who knew how to fry catfish, or caramelize onions, or slice corned beef thin enough to see through, they retired, and nobody replaced them. Some of the sandwiches survived. You can still find a cold turkey sandwich, a tuna melt, a grilled cheese, but most of them are gone. The chow mein sandwich, the liver and onions, the soused herring, the loose meat, those stayed regional, stayed specific, and when the diners that made them closed, the sandwiches went with them. If you ate any of these, you know what got lost. If you didn't, you missed something that can't be replicated. Food made by people who'd been cooking the same thing the same way for 20 years. Not because it was trendy or artisanal or farm-to-table, just because it worked. That's what disappeared when the truck stops died. Not just sandwiches, the people who knew how to make them.